Welcome. Welcome to Just Be Tarot. I'm going to do something different today. I'm going to read you a bedtime story. So I hope you get all comfy and cozy under the blankets, have some pillows, comfy. And I'm going to read you this book, this pop-up book, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. There's Alice, the little white rabbit. So cute. So are you all ready for me to start? Nice and comfy? Here we go. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Ooh, look at that tree. The trees are huge. They don't even fit in my frame. There's Alice. And there's her sister reading a book. And there's the little white rabbit in the back of the forest. Not completely hidden, just enough so only Alice can see. Let's start reading. Alice was beginning to get very tired of sitting by her sister on the bank and having nothing to do. Once or twice she had peeped into the book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it. And what is the use of a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversations? And there's Alice, peeking at her sister's book, saying, "What is this? What's the use of a book with no pictures in it?" Maybe she'll run along and find the rabbit. Maybe she'll run along and find some adventures with the rabbit. This down here says open me, so let's do that. Pull me up and look inside. Pull up the accordion, take a look. It's Alice at the bottom of a spirally staircase filled with books. She's falling and she's all the way to the end. Down this spirally staircase of books. I don't think you'll be able to see my viewers. Oh, you see the staircase in there? It spirals around. I don't know if you can see Alice in there, but she's in there. Let's read the next page. Ooh, look at this giant house. It's Alice. There she is, peeking through. Her legs are stretched out in the back. Her foot is sticking out of the chimney. Look at this house. It's beautiful. Be a nice house to live in. Let's continue. So she came upon a neat little house on which there was a bright brass plate with the name W. Rabbit on it. Little white gloves and a fan right here. She went in and found her way to a tidy little room with a table in the window and on it a fan and tiny white kid gloves. She took up the fan and gloves and was just going to leave the room when her eye fell upon a little bottle. There was no label this time, but nevertheless she uncorked it and put it to her lips. "I do hope it'll make me grow large again, for I'm quite tired of being such a little thing." It did so indeed. Before she had drunk half the bottle, she found her head pressing against the ceiling. She hastily put down the bottle, saying, "That's quite enough. I hope I shan't grow any more." Alas, it was too late to wish that. She went on growing, and very soon had to kneel down on the floor. Still she went on growing, and as a last resource, put one arm out of the window and one foot up the chimney. After a few moments, she heard a voice outside, "Fetch me my gloves this moment." Presently the white rabbit came up to the door and tried to open it, but as the door opened inward and Alice's elbow was pressed hard against it, that attempt proved a failure. Alice heard the rabbit say to itself, "Then I'll go around and get in the window." "That you won't," thought Alice, and after she heard the rabbit under the window, she suddenly spread out her hand and made a snatch in the air. She did not get a hold of anything, but she heard a little shriek and a fall and a crash of broken glass. After a minute or two, Alice heard the rabbit say, "A barrowful will do." "A barrowful of what?" thought Alice. The next moment, a shower of little pebbles came rattling in at the window. Alice noticed with some surprise that the pebbles were all turning into little cakes, and a bright idea came into her head. She swallowed one of the cakes and was delighted to find that she began shrinking. As soon as she was small enough to get through the door, she ran off as hard as she could and soon found herself safe in a thick wood. Ooh. Alice looked all around. Alice looked all around her at the flowers and blades of grass. There was a large mushroom growing near her, about the same height as herself. She stretched herself on tiptoe and peeped over the edge of the mushroom, and her eyes immediately met those of a large blue caterpillar quietly smoking a long hookah. The caterpillar addressed her in a languid, sleepy voice. "Who are you?" Alice replied rather shyly, I hardly know, sir. I can't remember things as I used to, and I don't keep the same size for 10 minutes. What size do you want to be? It asked. Well, I should like to be a little larger, sir, said Alice. 3 inches is such a wretched height to be. It is a very good height indeed, said the caterpillar, rearing itself upright as it spoke. It was exactly 3 inches high. The caterpillar got down off of the mushroom and crawled away, remarking as it went, "One side will make you grow taller, and the other side will make you grow shorter." Alice remained looking thoughtfully at the mushroom, trying to make out which were the 2 sides of it. As it was perfectly round, she found this a very difficult question. She stretched her arms around it and broke off a bit of the edge with each hand. "And now which is which?" she said, and nibbled a little of the right-handed bit. The next moment she felt a blow underneath her chin. It had struck her foot. Her chin was pressed so closely against her foot there was hardly room to open her mouth, but she did it at last and managed to swallow a morsel of the left-hand bit. "My head's free at last," said Alice in a tone of delight, which changed into alarm. All she could see when she looked down was an immense length of neck that seemed to rise like a stalk out of the sea of green leaves that lay far below. As there seemed to be no chance of getting her hands up to her head, she tried to get her head down to them, and was delighted to find that her neck would bend about easily in any direction. A sharp hiss made her draw back in a hurry. A large pigeon had flown into her face. "Serpent!" screamed the pigeon. "I am not a serpent," said Alice. "Let me alone." "Well, be off then," said the pigeon in a sulky tone as it settled down into its nest. Alice crouched down among the trees as well as she could. She remembered she still held the piece of mushroom and set to carefully nibbling first at one end, then the other, until she had succeeded in bringing herself down to her usual height. It was so long since she had been anything near the right size that it felt quite strange at first, but she got used to it in a few minutes. There's Alice with her long ass neck. Creepy a little bit. There it is. Let's close this book and go on to the next page. I'm gonna close this, right? Whoa, look at this picture. Oh, an angry little baby. An angry mother, too. She came upon an open place with a little house in it about 4 feet high. Whoever lives there, thought Alice. It'll never do to come upon them this size. Why, I should frighten them out of their wits. So she began nibbling at the right-hand bit again, till she had brought herself down to 9 inches. Suddenly a footman came running out of the wood. Judging by his face only, she would have called him a fish, and rapped loudly at the door. It was opened by another footman with a round face and large eyes like a frog. The fish footman began by producing a letter, saying in a solemn tone, "For the Duchess, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet." Then they both bowed down low, and their curls got entangled together. When the fish footman was gone, Alice went timidly up to the door and knocked. At that moment the door opened, and a large plate came skimming out and broke to pieces against one of the trees. The door led right into a large kitchen, which was full of smoke. The Duchess was sitting on a stool, nursing a baby. The cook was leaning over the fire, stirring a large cauldron, which seemed to be full of soup. "There's certainly too much pepper in that soup," said Alice. There was certainly too much of it in the air. Even the Duchess sneezed occasionally, and as for the baby, it was sneezing and howling alternately without a moment's pause. The only two creatures in the kitchen that did not sneeze were the cook and a large cat that was sitting on a hearth and grinning from ear to ear. "Please, would you tell me," said Alice, a little timidly, "why your cat grins like that?" "It's a Cheshire Cat," said the Duchess. "Pig." She said the last word, excuse me, she said the last word with such sudden violence that Alice jumped, but she saw that it was addressed to the baby. The cook took the cauldron of soup off the fire and once set to work throwing everything within her reach at the Duchess and the baby. "Oh, please mind what you're doing," cried Alice. "Here, you may nurse it a bit, if you like," the Duchess said to Alice, flinging the baby as her, and she spoke. "I must go and get ready to play croquet with the Queen." And she hurried out of the room. The cook threw a frying pan after her as she went, but it missed. Oh, the little baby turns into a pig. Alice caught the baby with some difficulty, as it was a queer-shaped little creature. The poor thing was snorting like a steam engine and kept doubling itself up and straightening itself out again, so she carried it out to the open air. The little thing grunted, and Alice looked very anxiously into its face. It had a very turned-up nose, much more like a snout than a nose, really. Also, its eyes were getting extremely small for a baby. The thing sobbed again, or grunted, it was impossible to say which. This time there could be no mistake about it. It was a pig. So she set the little creature down and felt quite relieved to see it trot away quietly into the woods. There's the cat. It would have made a dreadfully ugly child, she was just saying to herself when she was a little startled by seeing the Cheshire Cat sitting on a bough of a tree. The cat only grinned when it saw Alice. "Cheshire Puss," she began rather timidly. "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" "That depends a good deal on where you want to get to," said the cat. "In that direction lives a hatter, and in that direction lives a March hare. Do you play croquet with the Queen today?" "I should like it very much," said Alice, "but I haven't been invited yet." "You'll see me there," said the cat, and it vanished quite slowly, beginning with the tail and ending with the grin, which remained some time after the rest of it had gone. "Well, I've often seen a cat without a grin," thought Alice, "but a grin without a cat?" There's the cook. There's the cook. Putting the pepper in. Too much pepper. There's the baby. There's the Duchess. Let's move on to the next page. Oh, everyone's sitting at the table for some tea. The Mad Hatter, the rabbit, and Alice right there. She had not gone much farther before she came inside of the house of March Hare. There was a table set out under a tree in the front of the house, and the March Hare and the Hatter were having tea in it. A dormouse was sitting between them, fast asleep. Oh, there's the little mouse. "No room, no room," they cried when they saw Alice coming. "There's plenty of room," said Alice indignantly, and she sat down in a large armchair at one end of the table. The Hatter was the first to break the silence. "What day of the month is it?" he said, turning to Alice. He had taken his watch out of his pocket and was looking at it uneasily and holding it to his ear. Alice considered a little and said, "The 4th. 2 days wrong," sighed the Hatter. Alice had been looking over his shoulder with some curiosity. "What a funny watch," she remarked. "It tells the day of the month and doesn't tell what o'clock it is," said the Hatter. 1:30. Time for dinner." "I only wish it was," the March Hare said to itself in a whisper. "We quarreled last March," replied the Hatter, pointing with his teaspoon at the March Hare. "It was at the great concert given by the Queen of Hearts, and I had to sing 'Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, how I wonder where you're at.' Up above the world you fly, like a tea tray in the sky. Well, I'd hardly finished the first verse, said the Hatter, when the Queen bawled out, He's murdering the time! Off with his head! How dreadfully savage! Exclaimed Alice. Suppose we change the subject, March Hare interrupted. Really, now you ask me, said Alice. I don't think... Then you shouldn't talk, said the Hatter. This piece of rudeness was more than Alice could bear. She got up in disgust and walked off. Neither of the others took the least notice of her going. The last time she saw them, they were trying to put the dormouse into the teapot. I'll never go there again, said Alice, as she picked her way through the wood. It's the stupidest tea party I was ever been at all my life. Sorry, let's rewind. It's the stupidest tea party I was... once again. It's the stupidest tea party I ever was at in all my life. There we go. Just as she said this, she noticed that one of the trees had a door leading right into it. That's very curious, she thought, but everything's curious today. And in she went. She found herself in a beautiful garden among bright flower beds and cool fountains. A large rose tree stood near the entrance of the garden. The roses growing on it were white, but there were 3 gardeners at it, busily painting them red. Alice thought this was a very curious thing, and just as she came up she heard one of them say, Look out now, 5! Don't go splashing paint all over me like that! Would you tell me, please, said Alice, why you are painting those roses? 2 began in a low voice, Why, you see, miss... This here ought to have been a red rose tree, and we put in a white one by mistake, and if the Queen was to find out, she would have all of our heads cut off. At that moment, 5 called out, The Queen! The Queen! And the 3 gardeners threw themselves flat upon their faces. First came 10 soldiers, all shaped like the 3 gardeners. Next, the 10 courtiers. After these came the royal children, the little dears jumping merrily along hand in hand. Next came the guests, and among them Alice recognized the White Rabbit. Then followed the Knave of Hearts, and last of all came the King and Queen of Hearts. The procession came opposite Alice, and the Queen said severely, Who is this? What's your name, child? My name is Alice, so please, your majesty, said Alice very politely. But she added to herself, Why, they're only a pack of cards. I don't need to be afraid of them. And who are these? Said the Queen, pointing to the 3 gardeners who were lying around the rose tree. How should I know? Said Alice, surprised at her own courage. The Queen turned crimson with fury and began screaming, Off with their head! Off! Nonsense! Said Alice, and the Queen went silent. The King laid his hand upon her arm and timidly said, Consider, my dear, she is only a child. I see, said the Queen. Can you play croquet? Yes, shouted Alice. Let's go to the next page. Ooh, look at that. Everyone at the party there. Alice playing croquet with her flamingo. Come on then, get to your places, shouted the Queen. People began running about in all directions, tumbling up against each other. However, they got settled down in a minute and the game began. Alice thought she had never seen such a curious croquet ground in her life. The croquet balls were live hedgehogs and the mallets live flamingos. The soldiers had to double themselves up and stand on their hands and feet to make the arches. Alice was beginning to feel uneasy. She was looking for some way of escape and wondering whether she could get away without being seen, when she noticed a curious appearance in the air. She made it out to be a grin and said to herself, It's the Cheshire Cat. Now I shall have somebody to talk to. How are you going on? Said the cat as soon as there was mouth enough for it to speak with. In another moment the whole head appeared, and Alice began on account of the game, feeling very glad she had someone to listen to her. I don't think they play at all fairly, Alice began, and they all quarrel so dreadfully. One can't hear oneself speak. The cat's head began fading and disappeared entirely. Let's go on with the game, the Queen said, and Alice slowly followed her back to the croquet ground. I'm just doing a video. All the time they were playing, the Queen never left off quarreling with the other players and shouting, Off with his head! Off with her head! Those whom she sentenced were taken into custody by the soldiers. By the end of half an hour, all the players except the king and queen and Alice were under sentence of execution. Big red bird here. Then the queen, quite out of breath, said to Alice, "Have you seen the mock turtle yet?" "No," said Alice. "I don't even know what a mock turtle is." It's the thing mock turtle soup is made from," said the queen. "Come on, then, and he shall tell you this history." As they walked off together, Alice heard the king say in a low voice to the company generally, "You are all pardoned." "Come, that's a good thing," she said to herself. But very soon came upon a griffin lying fast asleep in the sun. "Up, lazy thing," said the queen, "and take this young lady to see the mock turtle. I must go back and see after some executions that I ordered." The griffin sat up and rubbed his eyes. "It's all her fancy that. They never execute anybody, you know. Come on." They had not gone far before they saw the mock turtle sitting sad and lonely on a ledge of a rock. Alice pitied him deeply. "This young lady," said the griffin, "wants to know your history." "I'll tell it," said the mock turtle in a deep, hollow tone. Once I was a real turtle. When we were little, we went to school in the sea." "I've been to a day school, too," said Alice. "We learned French and music. How many hours a day did you do lessons?" Oh, there's the mock turtle. His face is a little squished there. His face is very much squished. Anyway. 10 hours the first day," said the mock turtle. 9 the next, and so on. "That's the reason they're called lessons," the griffin remarked, "because they lessen from day to day." The mock turtle sighed deeply. He looked at Alice and tried to speak, but for a minute sobs choked his voice. "You may not have lived much under the sea." "I haven't," said Alice. "So you have no idea what a lobster quadrille is?" "No, indeed," said Alice. "What sort of a dance is it?" "Would you like to see a little of it?" said the mock turtle. "Very much indeed," said Alice. They began solemnly dancing round Alice, every now and then treading on her toes as they passed too close and waving their forepaws. The mock turtle sighed deeply again, and began to sing in a voice sometimes choked with sobs, when a cry of, "The trial's beginning!" was heard in the distance. "Come on," cried the griffin, and taking Alice by the hand, it hurried off. "What trial is it?" Alice panted as she ran, but the griffin only ran faster. This is the last page. Look at all these cards. Oh, so many. There's Alice. She's broken. She's supposed to be standing. The king and queen of hearts were seated on their throne with a great crowd assembled around them. The knave was standing before them in chains, and near the king was a white rabbit with a trumpet in one hand and a scroll in the other. In the middle of the court was a table with a large dish of tarts upon it. It made Alice quite hungry to look at them. "I wish they'd get the trial done," she thought, "and hand round those refreshments." "A herald read the accusation," said the king. The white rabbit blew on the trumpet and unrolled the scroll and read as follows. "The Queen of Hearts, she's made some tarts, all on a summer day. The Knave of Hearts, he stole those tarts and took them quite away." "Consider your verdict," the king said to the jury. "Not yet, not yet," the rabbit hastily interrupted. "There's a good deal more to come before that." "Call the first witness," said the king. The first witness was the Hatter. "Take off your hat," the king said. "It isn't mine," said the Hatter. "Stolen," the king exclaimed. "Give your evidence and don't be nervous, or I'll have you executed on the spot." Just at this moment, Alice felt a very curious sensation. She was beginning to grow larger again. The miserable Hatter went down on one knee. "I'm a poor man, your majesty," he began. "You're a very poor speaker," said the king. "If that's all you know about it, you may go." "And take his head off outside," the queen added. Let's rewind. "And take his head off outside," the queen added to one of the officers. But the Hatter was out of sight before the officer could get to the door. Call the next witness, said the king. Alice watched the White Rabbit, feeling very curious to see what the next witness would be like. Imagine her surprise when the White Rabbit read out at the top of his shrill little voice the name Alice! Here, cried Alice, forgetting how large she had grown in the last few minutes, and she jumped up in such a hurry that she tipped over the jury box, upsetting all the jurymen. Oh, I beg your pardon, she exclaimed, and began picking them up as quickly as she could. The king called out, Silence! And read out from his book. Rule 42. All persons more than a mile high to leave the court. Everybody looked at Alice. I'm not a mile high, said Alice. You are, said the king. Nearly 2 miles high, added the queen. Why, there they are, said the king triumphantly, pointing to the tarts on the table. Nothing can be clearer than that. Let the jury consider their verdict. No, no, said the queen. Sentence first, verdict afterward. Nonsense, said Alice loudly. Hold your tongue, said the queen, turning purple. I won't, said Alice. Off with her head, the queen shouted. Nobody moved. Who cares for you, said Alice. She had grown to her full size by this time. You're nothing but a pack of cards. At this, the whole pack rose up into the air and came flying down upon her. She gave a little scream and tried to beat them off, and found herself lying with her head in the lap of her sister, who was gently brushing some leaves that had fluttered down upon her face. Wake up, Alice, dear, said her sister. Why, what a long sleep you've had. Oh, I've had such a curious dream, said Alice, and she told her sister all these strange adventures. When she had finished, her sister kissed her and said, It was a curious dream, dear, but now it's getting late. So Alice got up and ran off, thinking while she ran what a wonderful dream it had been. The end. I hope you enjoyed this little reading, this little pop-up book reading. A pop-up adaptation of Lewis Carroll's original tale by Robert Sabuda. Great little book. If you're off to sleep, sweet dreams. Hope you have a comfy, restful sleep. And if you're not asleep, it's time to go. We'll talk soon. Hopefully you join me in my next readings. Have a good night. Sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite. Bye.